Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a discussion on legislation. There's an awful lot coming forward, there's an awful lot that has changed recently, and there's quite a few consultations taking place right now as well, many of which are going to affect you and you need to be aware of, and please do get involved in the consultation. I'll just move that microphone and keep jumping into it. So on the panel today we have Jim Button, we have from the Institute of Licensing, who's just written a new book and he just wants to make a quick announcement as well. Yeah, go on.
Yes, thank you very much. The new edition of my book, which is this, has just been published. If you would like to win a copy, if you go to the Institute of Licensing stall, for £5 you get the opportunity to win a signed copy, and all the proceeds go to children in need. And we've got the entry forms on the Institute stand. So please support children in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. I'll give you a minute for that one because it's a very worthwhile cause. Next to him, we have Matthew Freckleton representing Uber. We have Mike Smith, Licensing Manager for Guildford and Institute of Licensing. We have Lee Beach from the Welsh Government. And we have our regular Paul from the Department for Transport. And we have Jim Wilson from the Scottish Government on screen there as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you all a few minutes to introduce yourself, give a quick overview of where you see that we're up to right now, and then we do have some ideas of questions, but most of today I want to leave out to the audience for you to ask questions because this is your question and answer panel. Okay, I'll start with you, Jim.
Right, I'm James Button, or Jim Button. I'm a solicitor by profession. I'm also the president of the Institute of Licensing. As part of what I do, I've written the textbook on taxi law, and from my perspective at the moment, with the exception of the Uber-Sefton Supreme Court decision that we are awaiting, which you all heard about in the last session, by and large, I think things are reasonably settled. There are still questions about some of the quirks that might apply to applying for hire, but above all, and I'm sure Paul and Lee know exactly what I'm going to say, we need new comprehensive taxi law. The idea that we're using nearly 200-year-old legislation for hackney carriages and 50-year-old legislation for private hire vehicles, both reflect a world that no longer exists, is frankly pathetic. I can't think of another expression for it. And I would urge you, in your individual capacities, if you feel the need, to contact your MP and ask the government to respond to the Law Commission's publication, which is 11 years old, but it is still highly relevant. So my plea is new law.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew. I'm the head of cities for Uber, and my role, along with my two colleagues in the cities team, is responsible for looking after our regulatory relationships with licensing authorities across the country. We cover everything apart from London. There's a separate team which looks after the London relationship, and it's our job to ensure that our licenses, when they come up for renewal, get renewed, applying for new operator licenses, conducting base audits, consultation responses, attending trade meetings, engaging with key stakeholders when necessary, which might be a mayor, Chamber of Commerce, Business Improvement District, councillors, members of the Scottish Parliament, members of the Welsh Parliament, and resolving hyper-local policy challenges as and when they appear. In terms of the immediate future, we continue to innovate around driver and rider safety, and I'm sure we'll probably have some questions on that later. And looking forward to the consultation forthcoming on the English devolution bill, and seeing what the future of licensing across the country looks like following that.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Smith. I am the licensing manager for Guildford Borough Council in Surrey, but I'm here on my day off from that today, representing the Institute of Licensing. I'm the Vice Chair of the South East region. I'm on the IRL stand with Jim this afternoon. The role of the Institute of Licensing is to build professional knowledge and understanding for anyone who is involved in the licence trade. So it's not just available to local authorities, it is available to operators, trade advisors, legal advisors, trade representatives, etc. So we're here to try and build those bridges to make people work in partnership and build a better professional knowledge and understanding of all things licensing. I'm also really privileged to write in PHTM every month on all things licensing. So if you've got any FAQs or anything you want to hear about, please come see me. I'm always looking for ideas. I think, as others have said, we definitely need new taxi laws. It is very difficult as a local operated licensing manager to try and regulate a trade where the legislation is so hopelessly out of date. I think over the next couple of years, local government isn't going to know what's hit it with local government reorganisation. There are a number of questions about, certainly in my authority, how should you split up Surrey, and I'm sure the questions will apply to other counties across England as the devolution progresses. There is an awful lot of detail to be ironed out in terms of how taxing to private hire licensing is going to be administered. Hopefully a lot of it will come out in the wash with the government giving guidance as to how it should work. Hopefully that will lead to a reform of the existing system, because it eventually can't get any worse. You can't have authorities in sort of Surrey or others where licence holders are licensed predominantly many miles away, and the local authority doesn't have that ability to control. There is a need for consistency and better regulation to improve things, not just for the public, also for operators and members of the trade as well. So again, that's my plea.
Hi, I'm Lee Beach. I'm from the Welsh Government, policy officer there. The Welsh Government unfortunately announced in May of last year that the taxi and private hire bill would be removed from this legislative programme. That being said, they are still committed to legislative reforms as and when they have an opportunity to do so. Work is still underway, and we're working towards a draft bill, and we're also working on national standards that we hope to introduce voluntarily, working with our 22 local authorities on a voluntary basis. So that work is underway, and we also issued guidance in 2021 that is also in need of updating. So the hope is, the ambition is that we will introduce new guidance for local authorities in Wales with national standards to work on a voluntary basis before actual legislative reforms are possible.
Good afternoon, I'm Paul Elliott. I work at the Department for Transport on taxi and PHV policy. On our immediate horizon, we have obviously the VAT issue, and we're awaiting the outcome of the Supreme Court on that. We're also we looked at the responses to the consultation and the information that's been provided as part of that process, and the government will respond to that consultation shortly. We will also shortly be launching a consultation linked to what Mike said about the changes that are happening in local government, and consulting on making local transport authorities strategic authorities, which would be the new combined authorities responsible for licensing. So it would bring taxi and PHV licensing as a transport function under the control of the local transport authority in those areas.
Okay, and Jim?
Good afternoon, folks. Many thanks for the kind invitation to speak today. So I'm Jim Wilson. I work in the Scottish Government Justice Directorate, which is part of Directorate General for Justice and Education. So there's a couple of things I wanted to speak about today. One was in relation to the Scottish Government-led review of the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982, and that review will focus on a whole raft of licensing provisions, civic licensing provisions. Just to provide a bit of context, the 1982 Act has obviously been enforced for well over 40 years. It's been amended by multiple primary and secondary pieces of legislation and developed through case law, and it still to this day remains the principal regulatory framework for the licensing of activities other than alcohol, gambling and houses of multiple occupation in Scotland. So, as you will all know, that particular piece of legislation in Scotland provides the regulatory framework, which includes policy on taxi and private hire vehicles, The need for a review of the 1982 legislation was most recently highlighted by one of the Scottish Parliament committees. That was actually in relation to travel and fun fares licensed in Scotland Bill during the COVID period. And the committee did actually note the need for reform of the 1982 Act. We are acutely aware practitioners such as local authority licensing clerks, members of the Law Society of Scotland licensing subcommittee, and other key stakeholders have raised concerns around the outdated legislation, and in particular around the pace of technological change around activities that may be required to be licensed, and how do we keep up in terms of the policy being fit for purpose with technological change. We have established a task force to review the licensing provisions of that 1982 Act. That will include some dedicated discussions on taxi and private hire car licensing. The review will kind of focus on 5 key areas, so in no particular order. We will be looking at, through a stakeholder group that we'll get onto shortly, to propose a holistic change to the licensing framework, to look at ways of keeping pace with technology, the activities that would be licensed, the modernisation of language and concepts, and some practical points and pitfalls. So the membership is quite varied. We have private practice solicitors, a presence from local authorities. We have public health that we will be engaging. We also have a legal advocate. We also have Police Scotland, a voice from Trade and Standards, and we're also looking to engage with other key stakeholders as well. There will be separate meetings through subgroups to allow a selection of, for example, elected members across different local authorities to feedback on the high-level proposals and bring any issues, concerns to the attention of the group. So, for example, any focused discussion on aspects of the taxi and private hire licensing provisions would provide an opportunity to look at associated legislation. For example, Air Weapons and Licence in Scotland Act 2015, and a live policy issue, which is the Section 22 contract exemption. And this would be achieved through separate targeted engagement with key licensing stakeholders. I'm aware that we've got Matthew Freckleton on the panel, so we had a really helpful discussion with one of his colleagues yesterday, so we are keen to have a range of stakeholders that will support and inform these policy conversations going forward. I just wanted to, given that the focus was on legislation, I just wanted to speak briefly about something that we are actively looking to progress in relation to booking offices. So we have, through the 1982 legislation, the licensing of booking offices order, which was passed by Parliament way back in 2009. So that will only regulates the use of premises for the carrying on of a business which consists to any extent of the taking of bookings by any means of communication from members of the public for the hire of a relevant vehicle. We understand that in terms of the advances in technology that we need to look afresh at the booking offices regulations. We are aware, certainly from stakeholders, that there have been some concerns that there will be certain drivers that will not be required, given the current legislative position, to provide certain information that would be argued it would be relevant scrutiny, with the public safety firmly at the heart of that approach, where we have to be mindful that we have a minister, that's Siobhan Brown, who's the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, has been very supportive of the opportunity to come up with some refreshed regulations on booking offices. We've had a Scottish Government-led group that met very recently, just to give a conference a brief flavour of some of the discussion topics. The key kind of takeaways were to look at any refreshed policy which needs to ensure that passenger safeguarding is absolute paramount. The policy would need to be obviously adapted and potentially evolved to ensure that we have a modern licensing system that reflects advances in technology and of course meets citizens' needs. We need to learn from other jurisdictions. I've been in touch with Lee Beach from Welsh Assembly Government, who will be joining our next again conversation on booking offices in June. Gordon Hunter, who used to work for City of Edinburgh Council, is also in that group, and he will be speaking to James Button, who's obviously on the panel as well, because we are keen to engage with the Institute of Licensing to help inform our policy thinking as we go forward. So I know that in general it could be argued that current booking office licence holders are not exactly jumping up and down for change, but we are aware stakeholders are raising, I think, quite valid concerns about the need to try and ensure that all drivers and businesses are treated equally and subject to the same processes and procedures. Final point, obviously we need to think about passenger safeguarding, and we, as part of our consideration, will do that through a violence against women and girls lens, and what safeguarding can be put in place to reduce the risk of any incidents from happening. We're acutely aware of some of the challenges that have been raised by other taxi, private hire stakeholders around recruitment challenge, ageing workforce, driver shortage, and many other issues that persist. That's all I wanted to say just now. Again, just thanks to the organisers for the kind invitation, and I'll pass back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Very detailed explanation there. Have we got any questions so far from the audience, or shall I just kick off a few sample ideas from here? Okay, at the back. Stephen? If you just wait for the microphone, please, and please hold the microphone quite close to your mouth, because otherwise the people who are remote attending can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me? Good. I was just wondering, and I've seen it in operation, each licensing council, let's say some licensing councils have different rules. Now, specifically on the implication of CCTV cameras. I am a Rother District Council licensed, well, I'm licensed by Rother District Council, and we have to have CCTV cameras in our car. Now, Wilden, who are the next door councils, they haven't decided whether their drivers are going to need the same camera system, well, need any camera systems. So I think that's a bit daft. Surely, if the CCTV cameras are brought in, it should be across the country, not down to the individual councils to make up their minds whether their drivers should be CCTV covered. Also, I have spoken to drivers who are licensed by Lewis District. Now, they have to have CCTV cameras in their cars, but they are different systems, and they don't have to have the button system, which means that you activate an audio recording and visual recording if you feel that you are under threat, or if your passengers feel are under threat. So two councils which are pretty close together are operating different systems. Now, it doesn't really seem to make sense. So should it not be more sensible that every single council in the country, their drivers have to have CCTV in their cars?
Okay, so you're quite right. When Lewis and Eastbourne first introduced their CCTV requirement, they didn't allow audio at all. And then when they did decide that they're going to, they had the wrong type of audio, and it took quite a long time to get that put right for them. There is a lack of understanding, and I'm pleased to say that the ICO have now released and issued a clear guidance now, not just for local authorities, but for the trade themselves, because there's always been a very severe lack of understanding of what the regulations are. But correct me if I'm wrong, is that not part of what the Devolution Act is about? The mix and match of licensing and trying to get towards a national standard? Sorry, Jim, I'll come back to you. Steve.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, so part of the thing that we'll be consulting on is transferring licensing.
Bit closer to your mouth.
Sorry, so we would end up with fewer licensing authorities, We also issue guidance, best practice and statutory guidance to licensing authorities. So all of that combined, if it's taken forward, should increase the consistency in licensing.
Yeah, but part of the best practice guidance was that councils should assess, but not necessarily mandate, wasn't it?
Yes, because it is guidance.
Yeah. Jim?
I think you've hit a really important point. There are 268, I think it is, different licensing authorities across England and Wales, and there are probably 267 different sets of conditions and requirements. Ideally, we have a common standard. It makes no sense to say that somebody is not safe to be a driver in District A and is licensed in District B. It makes a mockery of the entire system. The government, previous government, promised that there would be statutory standards introduced. They didn't say whether those were going to be absolute standards or minimum standards, and the whole thing has fallen by the way anyway. So it is a major problem. Now, local authorities should be able to cooperate. You may as well try to merge water and oil as to get local authorities to cooperate. The 10 Greater Manchester authorities, under the leadership for the last, I think it's 7 or 8 years, failed to achieve common standards, and that's for 10 authorities. So it is a really fundamental problem. Now, if the devolution white paper achieves what it says it might do, which is take taxi licensing to counties and strategic authorities and/or, there will be fewer licensing authorities, but there will still be differences because they are still going to have different approaches. And I can say this, I'm not employed by councils. The difficulty is that councils change and ideas of those councillors change. So, for example, there are some authorities that in the last fortnight are now controlled by Reform. I'm not a political animal. They may well have, and I've never seen any taxi policies from Reform, I have to say. I haven't seen any from any other parliamentary party either. But they may well have different ideas from the Conservatives, Labour, Liberal that they've deposed. And in the blink of an eye, your requirements change. So, to be honest, I think there is a very, very good argument for national, clear, absolute standards, because if they're minimum, there will always be some authorities that demand more.
Matthew, and then we've got Jim.
Thanks, David. Certainly at Uber, we think that implementing CCTV is probably one of the single biggest things that would improve safety in the industry in vehicles. And that's not just driver safety, it's also rider safety. And certainly when we think about safety measures at Uber, we always think about it in equal measure, you know, driver and rider. We've had some updates to our technology earlier this year, so now if a driver has CCTV in their vehicle, they can let us know that. And then when the rider orders the Uber, we actually notify the rider that CCTV is in the vehicle. You know, I'm aware, you know, through my day job of several incidents and cases that have come about in vehicles, and the CCTV was the key critical piece of evidence that existed that brought a prosecution either against a rider or a driver. So yeah, we fully support CCTV, you know, across the industry.
Okay, Jim.
Thanks very much for bringing me in. Yeah, great question from the floor. I think one of the key points to make here is that, I mean, it's quite, on occasion, quite a tricky balancing act to try and respect the independence of licensing authorities, councils, when they are setting policy, obviously within the regulatory framework. But the chap who posed the question makes a really important point around consistency. So, you know, we have best practice guidance for taxi licence and private hire car licensing in Scotland that was last published in May 2023. And we recognise that certainly when it comes to security measures, of course, that would include CCTV. We highlight the Information Commissioner's Office guidance on video surveillance, because we do think that will be a helpful step for licence holders when they're actually making a decision, and of course support the local authorities as well. I think that this is a key point as well, that the installation of CCTV in taxis and private hire cars may offer that strong degree of security in terms of safety of both the passenger and driver. And it could be, in certain cases, useful tool when it comes to the corroboration on cases of beer disputes, vandalism, other antisocial behaviour or criminal behaviour that's committed within the vehicle. So I've heard, various calls that, that there is that kind of variation across the 32 local authorities in Scotland, and how do you actually try and come up with a solution that will achieve national consistency. So it is tricky, we're trying to respect in the spirit of local democracy the role of independent local authorities, but we're also trying to look at using Scottish Government best practice guidance to showcase what we would deem to be good examples of policy and action as well, and that includes where CCTV comes in. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, we're not going to get too bogged down with CCTV, so I would like to direct you to the April edition of the Private Hiring Taxi Monthly, and within that edition we finally got clear and simple guidance from the Information Commissioners themselves. And as I'm sure everybody on the panel will agree, that is no mean feat to actually achieve. Trying to get clear guidance and trying to get them to understand why it needed to be clear and simple guidance was not easy, but we got it. And it's been published, it's live, and I invite you all to have a look at it and understand it. Okay? So, we have a lot of other issues that are coming up. We've got a lot of other concerns that are going around. You've all seen protests and May Day strikes and other issues and concerns. So we have a couple of suggestions with regards to cross-border hiring, or the issue of cross-border hiring that has impacted everybody, okay? So there are a number of options, one of them being, of course, the button plan, which James kindly expressed last year at this event in detail. You had your own seminar last time, didn't you? Another one is to enforce Section 75(1)(8) of the Miscellaneous Provisions Act, which defines where a private hire vehicle is available for work. There's another idea that is actually one of mine that would need a change in government legislation, because currently you can introduce an intended use policy only on a hackney carriage vehicle. You cannot introduce it on a private hire vehicle. My idea would be to introduce it onto all vehicle types. And that way, it doesn't mean that you cannot work outside of the area at all. It just means that your intention must be to predominantly work within your licensed area. There's an awful lot of other ideas as well. One of them being there is disconcern within drivers about how much they're earning per hour or per trip. So maybe introduce, as we've currently got now, a metered fare for hackney carriages, which is a maximum fare. Maybe we could have a look at seeing if we can introduce a minimum rate for private hire drivers. So those are a few ideas. Any suggestions from the panel? Any questions from the audience? Sham? Stephen, can you take a microphone to Sham?
Thank you, Dave. And Sham Rajas from Manchester. I have been dealing with Manchester City Council for more than 3 decades. And talking about the fares, yes, hackney carriage licence fares are always by the licence department. But the private hire, we still have to inform when you get an operator's licence, even when it's Christmas fares, that what will we be charging to the public. So we have to inform them and let them know, because if anybody's overcharged and they have to look into it, they come and do a check and slap the wrist or whatever. But it's important. And I know that we've spoken about the gentleman said on the right from the transport, the deregulation, what you just mentioned. I mean, the cross-border hire, I mean, it's all wrong. There's no such thing as that they can work as a cross-border hire. The deregulation, everybody talks about it, 2015, yeah? They need to look into it, the government. They need to have the meeting with the trade representatives like Dave and the people on this panel, so then they know what we're talking about. So you can't work, cross-border hire. That needs to be stopped. And because obviously it's a big issue with Wolverhampton, Sefton and other, they're working. And they haven't got a clue. There's not enough enforcement. And also what you mentioned, the devolution earlier on, sir, which is we don't want that, and the Greater Manchester will never work. We won't let it happen. What you mentioned about Andy Burnham, no way. We don't want it. We want to keep it separate. We don't want a bigger county council under run, whether it's Scotland or whether it's anywhere else in the country. Not acceptable. Work in your own council. That's what we want. That's how it should be.
Okay. Paul?
The cross-border hiring out of area working, we have looked at that, and we had workshops. This was a number of years ago now. I think 2019, I think, from rough memory. But there isn't a consensus as to what the solution for that should be. We have looked at various options, and the reasons that what we want to do is try and look at the reasons why the trade licenses away from the area that they intend to work in. 99.9% of those who license out of area are not doing so because they have something to hide. They don't have a bad background that they're trying to hide from licensing authorities. They are fundamentally decent, hard-working, honest people, but they are trying to get into the trade as quickly as they can, as cheaply as they can. So what we want to do is try and increase consistency in those licensing requirements. We will be consulting on transferring licensing to local transport authorities. Again, that would, if you reduce the number of licensing authorities, that would increase consistency. And what we want to do is try and remove the things that induce the trade to license out of area, which would maintain the flexibility within the trade, because a private hire trade is a broad church. You've got chauffeurs who won't be doing your normal A to B shuttle runs. They'll be picking people up from Manchester Airport, taking them down to a meeting in Cardiff, then on to one in Bristol. And so we need to recognise that it is a broad trade, and that's what we're trying to get to the causes of the problem, and ultimately not find a cure that is worse than the problem itself.
Hang on 1 second, Arne first.
So in Wales we've looked at cross-bordering because it comes up as a major concern for stakeholders repeatedly, and that's all stakeholders. I think it is important to differentiate between cross-bordering and out-of-area working, because there's always been a need for cross-border hire, airports, school contracts. In Wales, we have major events that happen in cities and in rural areas, and for those events to be successful, you do need an increase in vehicles and drivers available at peak times. What frustrates the trade, and we're very aware of this, is when they foresee other drivers that are working predominantly in their area, but they're not licensed in that area because they've looked for a different route to get a license in a different area, and they can perceive those conditions or training requirements, vehicle standards, if you like, to be much more, they're vast in different areas, and that's why our focus has been on national standards, which are very difficult to achieve. It's not simple. And that's why we're looking to roll out guidance with probably national minimum standards to start with. If you do that, then you start to get consistency across the local authorities, and if that happens, the drivers have no reason then to apply for a licence elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, sir. A number of really interesting and varied points raised. I think in terms of out-of-area working, cross-border hire, whatever you want to call it, I think we've all been most of us on the panel have been quite clear in that we all want a consistency of standards that is only going to be brought about by either a Supreme Court declaration or by new legislation. I mean, at the moment we have a system where in Manchester or Guildford or any other authority, if there are licence holders who are licensed elsewhere and working in that area. And that obviously upsets the local trade. It upsets local licensing officer. It upsets me as well, because I don't have any knowledge control or any income from those license holders. So it makes my role as a local authority licensing manager very, very difficult. So I think we all want the same thing, but it's up to either the courts or the government to deliver it. As Paul says, I hope that the devolution white paper will bring about a consistency of standards. And I think, as Paul said, most licence holders want to be licensed as quickly and as cheaply and as easily as possible. And if we're all working to the same standard, then hopefully that will become a reality. With respect to fares, Hackney carriage fares are obviously capped by the local authority for reasons of public safety. We want, whether it's Mrs. Wiggins going to the hairdressers or Mr. Smith going to the airport, or somebody coming out of a nightclub on a night time, we all want to be able to get into a taxi and know that the price that you're going to be charged is sort of regulated, so that we're not taken advantage of. For private hire, as Paul says, it is a diverse industry. The local authority has no power to set fares for private hire vehicles, and really it's up to the customers and operators to come to an agreement, or get a quote for fares, and for them to resolve it themselves rather than involving the local authority. So it is very much one from there. But I think, as we've all said, we need more consistency. We need better standards. I think ultimately we all want the same thing. It's up to us. It's up to others. It's up to anyone else. It's up to the government. To deliver that for us.
I think there are a number of points, and I think they're very well made. The first thing I'd say is that the Deregulation Act didn't introduce the ability for cross-border activity. The Deregulation Act allowed subcontracting across borders, which is a different thing. The ability to work anywhere has developed, for private hire, has developed from the interpretation of the 1976 Act by the High Court and the Court of Appeal over the course of 40 years. So unless and until either the Supreme Court reverse all those judgments, and I can't honestly see a situation where that's going to arise, or we have new legislation, we are going to continue with that. Repealing the Deregulation Act isn't going to stop cross-border activity. So it's a question of understanding. In terms of the consistency, of course we want consistency. It's absurd that we don't have this consistency. And if you equate it to, for example, aeroplanes, would any of you get on an aeroplane which has been approved by an authority that wasn't approved by another authority, with a pilot that has been turned down or had their airplane pilot's license revoked by another authority? Well, if you would, good luck to you. But that's exactly what's happening with Hackney carriage and private hire licensing. And, with the best will in the world, it doesn't make any sense. Ultimately, we all want public safety. You want to be able to provide a safe form of transport to your customers. You want to be able to provide secure employment or engagement, however you want to do it, with your drivers at a fair rate, which allows you to make a reasonable income. And that's perfectly reasonable. Local authorities want the same. The problem is that there isn't that conversation in a lot of cases. As I said, the Greater Manchester example is a perfect one. Actually getting authorities to agree on a commonality of standards, a commonality of approach, is extraordinarily difficult. And the final point I'd say is, yes, central government can issue guidance. They can issue guidance, with the greatest respect to my colleagues, till they're blue in the face. But it is only guidance. And if a local authority say, well, for these good reasons, we are not going to follow that guidance, then there's very little that can actually be done. Sure, the authority can be judicially reviewed, but that judicial review isn't whether they should follow the guidance, it's whether they took the decision not to follow the guidance in the right way. So I come back to it, and I'm sorry I sound like a broken record. We need new legislation. Or adopt the button plan. If you can find an authority that will take the button plan forward, then, oh boy, will it change things. And by the way, I didn't name that, you did.
Finally, we've got Jim from the Scottish Government, and then we've got 3 people waiting in the audience with questions. Jim?
Thanks very much. Yeah, just a brief contribution, just really just in relation to the points that were made around sort of taxi fares. So just, I suppose from a Scottish perspective, local licensing authorities in Scotland have the duty under Section 17, actually, of the 1982 legislation that I mentioned earlier. That is obviously to fix the scales for fares and all other charges in connection with the hire of taxis in their area, and they've got a duty to review the resulting fare scales within 18 months as well. So I suspect that in terms of that subgroup discussion that I mentioned earlier, any proposed reforms that relate to taxi and private hire car vehicle licensing in Scotland, I suspect that financial impact, which would obviously have to accompany the legislation through a financial memorandum, and the impact assessments would obviously have to look at the current fare regime. Is it working? Does it need to be evolved? If so, why? So yeah, really good question. So I just thought it useful just to provide a little bit of context from Scotland that I suspect that taxi fares will no doubt crop up during these subgroup conversations going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got 5 people with questions in the audience now, 6. So if we can keep the questions as brief and succinct as possible, and the answers as brief and succinct as possible, because we've got 15 minutes left. So, number 1, please.
Hi there. Question for Matthew. Just want to know, why did Uber take a unilateral decision, instead of getting licensed in local authorities, to go regional, for example, London? And the problem that we've got now is that we've got out-of-town, out-of-border vehicles in those local authorities operating 24/7, and they're not licensed in that local area. So not only they're not licensed, most of those drivers are not from the area. Also, none of that licensing money goes to that local authority. And the other question is, for Mike, how do you enforce that? How do we enforce those vehicles which are not licensed there? I'm not saying Uber shouldn't be licensed. We would like Uber to be licensed again. They were once licensed in the local Bolt are licensed in that local authority. So my question is, why Uber aren't there?
Yes, I'll try and be quick, as David asked me to be. I think some of those agreements, shall we call them, that were put in place was before my time. I've been at Uber. I've been at the company nearly 4 years. So obviously we have our relationship with Transport for London. With that, we have effectively a geofence that's drawn around London, encompassing some of the airports. And based on where we have drawn that geofence, it kind of straddles certain council boundaries, which would make it difficult for us to then acquire a license, activate drivers in those areas. We do continually look at that. We have had conversations with councils around that peripheral. The most recent one was Crawley Council, for example, earlier this year, who equally would like us to be licensed there. We want good regulatory relationships with our councils. And yeah, it is just something we do continually look at. So I'm sort of trying to straddle the, it's never say never kind of thing. We do continually look at it, and we would like to be licensed in some of those areas. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Really good question. So, I mean, I would like Uber or any other operator working in my area to be licensed in my area, and that way I know I can have good relations with the operator, know who the drivers and the vehicles are, and deal with any issues particularly. And that comes down from the sort of the high end of dealing with very serious allegations against drivers to more sort of the soft end, in that, for example, if we get a report from the police that says somebody got into a vehicle, they made an allegation. We can very easily put an email out to all drivers to say, did you take customers from the town centre to the Travelodge? If you were that driver, the police would like to speak to you to help with their inquiries as a result of this passenger complaint. So it's from the high end to the soft end, there is a huge reason for local control. So I welcome Uber or any other operator to make an application with Guildford at any point. Yes, so I mean, what I would, in terms of how we deal with the situation now, one is lobbying, in that I'm here and very vocal in that I think the law needs to change for everyone's good. So we have that that better local control for residents and local trade. It is potentially possible for us as a local authority to have authorisation from Transport for London in order to deal with drivers and vehicles. However, that authorisation, we still need a resource from the money that goes from the TfL licence holders into TfL, trickling down to the areas where vehicles are working. So that that authorisation is only good if the money and resource follows them. So there are a number of solutions potentially available, all of which are quite sort of either it's simple in that if the operator came licensed, it would be fairly easy to do, but otherwise we do work hard. We do sort of pass complaints on to TfL. We do encourage them to come to our area to work to do some compliance should they wish to. That way we can do it. But as I ultimately, that's what we said before. It's only going to really change if the law is either updated or clarified to a certain degree.
I think on a local level, the local authority can change some of its rules in order, that they don't have a physical office or a CAD office there. They have to realise that it's the modern world. They have to change the times.
Well, certainly there are authorities have different dates on their policy, and as the gentleman around CCTV talked about, and ultimately if it comes down to consistency again.
Okay. Question number 2, please.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, panel. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luke. I'm a City of Aberdeen taxi driver. I have basically a question for Jim from the Scottish Government and for Matthew with Uber. I'll go Jim first, real quick. I'm part of the Taxi Private Hire Consultation Group, which is a subcommittee with the Aberdeen City Council. And one of the things that I'm trying to get sorted is the heights and angles that are put on us for our licensed vehicles, the taxis and private hires. There's no standard across Scotland. So, like for example, our neighbouring council, Aberdeenshire, there's no such standard at all, whereas in the City of Aberdeen, and rightly so, there is a high standard, but with some of the companies here exhibitioning their vehicles today, like Cab Direct, Taxi Centre, without potential heavy modification, if I was to buy one of these vehicles today, they would fail the Hackney, although they are totally safe, but they would fail due to the heights and angles of the ramp. So that is obviously something we would like to get sorted. Matthew, obviously we've met before up the road. Last year you were granted the licence from Aberdeen City Council to operate. You just mentioned that you like to have a good relationship with councils. However, before you applied for your licence, you knew that in the City of Aberdeen, all taxi and private hire drivers must do the street knowledge test. Aberdeen City Council legally does issue private hire badges. However, if you did want that badge, you must do the street knowledge test. So when you do the street knowledge test and you pass, you might as well opt for a taxi badge, which allows you to drive both vehicles. You were obviously granted the licence, as I just mentioned, in June last year. But as soon as you were granted the licence, you're fighting us to have the street knowledge test dropped, even though you knew from the beginning that that standard was already there. Right now, as far as I'm aware, your booking office, if that's what you want to call it, is an empty desk on Berry Street. You have 3 vehicles operating on your app. Myself and my fellow licensed drivers in the City of Aberdeen could easily apply and join Uber and work for them, but we have a choice. And apart from 3 drivers, we choose not to work for Uber. All the private hire cars, bar 3, have a meter, along with the taxis, that is regulated by Aberdeen City Council. It allows us to have a living wage, a reasonable living. You know, yourself, Matthew, are battling us at every stage with the local groups, our Union Street, Aberdeen Inspired. Aberdeen City Council actually does a very good job at protecting the local businesses. 600 to 700 licensed drivers. We are local, self-employed businesses. The street knowledge test is a qualification that allows us to do our job without the need for any sat-navs. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you. There is a shortage of drivers in Aberdeen, okay, and it is creating a public safety risk as far as we are concerned. Yes, there is a street knowledge test. It has somewhere between a 15 and 30% pass rate, depending on the information that's come out. We think that that is not in line with Scottish Government best practice guidance, which talks about if you are to have a street knowledge test, it should not create unnecessary barriers to entry, which we think it does. We have, since getting that booking office license, we have had lots of new drivers come to our office saying, hey, Uber's here, we want to come work for you, what do we need to do to go get licensed? So we point them in the direction of the council. They learn about these street knowledge tests. It's very complicated, takes a long time to pass, a long time to learn, and has a very low pass rate. So, the open question I've suggested in various forums is, Edinburgh does not have a street knowledge test. Glasgow does not have a street knowledge test. How much more complicated is Aberdeen to navigate around compared to Edinburgh and Glasgow? There was earlier this year an unmet demand survey that was conducted. We were not told about that. We were not consulted on that. Our data did not make it into the report that was presented at Licensing Committee. I have emails between the chair and deputy chair of licensing expressing, almost begging, to be able to find a way to provide this data, and I was not furnished with that information. So in our opinion, that report that was presented, which said there was no unmet demand in Aberdeen, was a misleading report. Okay? And we know from the data in our own system that we have significant unmet demand, and we can create hundreds of new work opportunities for drivers. So we will, yes, continue to lobby, advocate, and campaign for when we have the full policy review later this year, which the council has committed to, and doing a review of the street knowledge test to seek its removal. Yes.
Okay, very quickly follow on, but we've got 3 minutes left and we've got 4 other people we haven't waiting yet.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come back. I just wanted to say as well, it was last week or the week before that, you gave an interview with BBC Radio Scotland saying that you're not invited to the taxi private hire and consultation groups. That's not true. You've been invited multiple times to the taxi private hire consultation group as a licensed operator within the city of Aberdeen, and there is no unmet demand. When you get your job requests through your app, whether it's 10, 1,000, 10,000, if these people, when they're opening up the Uber app, if they can't get an Uber car, they're not just closing the app and walking home. The traditional taxi companies that are already there, they use us. They use us. There is no unmet demand. And I just want to say very quickly, so somebody else can get the mic, the survey, which was conducted by an independent survey company, I forget the name, but it's a national firm, they independently conducted their survey with the taxi ranks. Whether you knew about it or not, they conducted the survey, and there was no significant delay in taxis. Obviously, private hire cars can't go to the rank anyway. But again, I stress the point that you are invited to the taxi private hire consultation group in Aberdeen, and there is no unmet demand.
You're wrong, significantly wrong. I know for our own data that we have significant amounts of unmet demand. With regards to the consultation group, Uber is prevented from attending the trade group meetings with the council. Yes, I am. I've had email communications with the council. They have expressed the view to me that only one booking office license holder is allowed to attend those meetings, which is Russell from Rainbow Taxis. I've expressed the perfectly reasonable point of view that it is unreasonable for a competitor of mine to represent my interests in front of licensing officials and councillors. And unfortunately, yes, we want a good, strong working relationship with all our regulators, and we had to engage legal counsel to express those views more firmly towards Aberdeen City Council. That is the relationship that we want with the council. You referenced the other meetings that the other booking office license hold. Yes, I have been invited to those meetings, but it is the regulatory relationship that I want with Aberdeen City Council and in those meetings.
Okay, very briefly on anybody else on the panel, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 5 people waiting yet. No. Okay.
Paul, you made an excellent observation about the private hire and taxi sector, that it's very diverse in terms of the different business models, the passenger use, the demographics, all those kind of things. One of the issues with the VAT fare consultation was this sort of, I guess, the lack of understanding of that sort of diversity within the sector. So what it meant was a lot of the respondents, particularly within the sector, spent a lot of time sort of arguing against the premises rather than trying to get to the optimal solution. So if you're looking to now consult over, changes of licensing structure across board of those kind of things, before you even get to the consultation stage, where the kind of questions really, the quality of the questions determine the quality of the answers, how are you going to make sure you've done that engagement so you really understand the sector across the board?
So the local government is changing, come hell or high water. That's what the devolution framework is going to be bringing about. The questions that we are proposing will be asked are very broad, so that it will give an opportunity for respondents to speak more openly than they have in perhaps other conversations that we've run, which had rather closed questions. So hopefully that would enable more diverse and wider ranges of views to be expressed.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi there. I'm a taxi driver from Elmbridge, working from Weybridge train station. I've got a question to Matthew Relketon. Thank you so much for coming here. I will be very quick, but our case is well over 1 year. And regarding the geofencing, which is part of our today meeting, the Uber, we've got big problem with the Uber. They're surrounding our train station 24/7. We've got only 2 taxi ranks to work from in Elmbridge Borough. I understand there should be some kind of competition, of course. We don't want to have the, just the monopoly down there. But what is happening? We've got the 2 car parks around the train station, and it's 24/7. It's fully occupied by Uber. They don't pay any car park fees. They don't pay any single penny to Elmbridge Borough Council. They don't contribute anything. Financially, we are completely squashed. Thank you. The Uber had installed the geofence on Weybridge station approach. Now it's much more better. Before they were waiting next to the taxi rank for half an hour and coming back and doing 24/7. Thank you for that. The Uber geofence was installed, but we were asking for the wider geofence. And recently the council, the MPs, the solicitors, and the TfL, everyone is still ongoing case. They're asking to expand the geofence into the both car parks around the train station, which belongs to Elmbridge Borough Council. Elmbridge Borough Council and MPs, councillors made numerous attempts, for the Uber to expand the geofence, because the same vehicle is picking up from the station, going back, dropping the customer, coming back to the car park, which is next to the train station, waiting till he's gonna get the job from the station. He's down there without any reason. He's simply just making himself visible on the Uber app. When they're coming back, completing the job, he is completing same routine for 5-6 hours, doesn't matter, till he getting tired. We get supplied so many evidence. The council is really giving up, and then just would like to ask you if please expand the geofence. Uber is not going to get poorer, the driver's not going to get poorer, they can work everywhere. As a taxi drivers, like I said earlier, sorry to mention again, we've got only 2 taxi ranks where we can earn the money. There is no more taxi ranks, so please, on behalf of all Elmbridge taxi drivers who got the families, who supporting the family, it's very difficult to make living. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for the question. And, we're not regulated by the council, but the council did reach out to us the other year through, obviously, the deputations that you and other drivers had made and implemented the technology as you described. In the interest of brevity, look, what I'll do is tomorrow I'll reach back out to Elmbridge Council, because obviously we have that relationship now, and just check in with them to see if they think there's something else that we can look at in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Just go back to the bigger picture rather than the local disputes. There was a government debate about private hire and taxi licensing earlier in the year, which demonstrated, I think, complete lack of understanding at every level within government of what was required and what actually happens. It's simple enough to nationally license buses, trucks, and other vehicles like that. Why is it so difficult to actually get some understanding as to what comprises a national standard for private hire drivers and private hire cars, when basically you're dealing with an ordinary driving license and an ordinary car? They're not specialist vehicles, they're not specialist skill sets, they're basically a car and a driver. We have Andy Burnham jumping around because he sees lots of Wolverhampton plates driving around Manchester, and he thinks people are coming up from Wolverhampton every day to take his customers away. The only reason they're doing that is because Manchester's various local authorities are so pathetically slow at actually issuing licenses to drivers. It might take 10 months in some boroughs, so they go to Wolverhampton where it takes 10 days. How is the industry not addressing this properly to get a national standard where wherever you get a private hire license, you can drive the private hire car anywhere and everywhere? And why also, when this is done, do not chauffeurs have a separate license? Because they do a separate and completely different type of work.
Okay.
I think the answer lies with...
Sorry, Jim, before you answer. Jim Wilson from Scottish Government has got to leave. He's got a meeting in 15 minutes. So thank you, Jim, for your attendance. It's been a pleasure and delight having you. And we'll see you at the next one. Okay, Jim.
I think the answer is 650 people who sit in Westminster, 649 of whom apparently don't understand the law relating to private hire or hackney carriage use, as was demonstrated by that debate. There is a lack of willingness on the part of central government, and I'm talking politicians here, not my colleagues from the civil service, to address the problems of this industry. And the situation is ludicrous. But unless and until you can get that political will at governmental level, and that means the politicians who sit in cabinet actually taking this seriously, then until then, I'm afraid we're all spitting in the wind.
But we run the risk of bad legislation being made in the interim, do we not?
Always.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're going on, we're 5 minutes over right now. I've still got one waiting here. While you're listening to the questions, you'll note on the screen there is the SEO guidance for recording devices. As I referred to earlier on, that was released Abdul was first. That was released in April. It took a long time, so please digest that. So we are 5 minutes over, so the final questions, please, if you can keep them brief. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the panel and the member present and also the chair. First of all, I would like to ask the panel explain the saturation of the situation, what the saturation mean in commercial terms. Secondly, the Hoobers or the Wolverhamptons work in a different areas. They are not control of the local councils. They can do what they like, and also if it is any, call the Wolverhampton or other council to come along with them with the police escort to sort them out. So I think that's a completely ridiculous and wasting of time to the local economy. So obviously, if they have any examples, if they want to see how their drivers work it, I think so that they come to Oldham, and I will take them to the journey free of charge to the local areas, what they do and how they make the law break. And I'm totally agree with Raja Sujad, who have said it earlier, that they should work in their own areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody for the panel?
So I'm not entirely sure what the question was.
I think it was more reiterating that there is an issue with cross-border and areas being flooded.
Yeah, well, look, we support the policy of national standards, and on the topic of devolution, I think it is correct to say when you've started that devolution process, it's very difficult to stop it. I can't think of a situation where devolution has been suggested and it's not happened. So I can see, if you accept that as fact, it's very plausible in the future we will see, rather than 280 licensing authorities, we'll see 70 under these larger combined authority areas. Manchester, rather than 10 licenses, will be 1 under TFGM. It was interesting, Andy Burnham's roundtable a couple of weeks ago, which I attended, was actually the number of people there who were sort of advocating, almost begging Andy to actually take those 10 licensing authorities' responsibilities and put it under one as TFGM, creating that economy of scale, being able to invest in people, invest in processes, and invest in technology, and create a level playing field across the country if similar things happened elsewhere.
Okay, I think it's very important. I mean, have we got an actual date of when the consultation is going live, or has it been live and it's ended now? Shortly. The old shortly from the DFT. Okay. So keep your eyes peeled for that one coming out. When it does come out, please do get involved. So just 1 second, Sham. Because it's very important that this devolution that Andy Burnham's asking for is not something that he is asking for. It's something that the DFT released on the 18th of December, was it? The white paper? 17th. Yeah. Is that going to do anything to address the cross-border issue? Well, actually, no. It's going to drop the borders for the hackney carriages as well and double the problem. Is it going to do anything to prevent people from going licensed shopping? Well, actually, no, because if it's still cheaper to go elsewhere and obtain a license and faster, then they're still going to do it. Is it possible to ban a vehicle from outside of the district entering an area? Well, no, because as long as it's pre-booked, it's perfectly legal for it to be there. So be very, very mindful and assess this, because the one thing it would achieve, and the actual goal of devolution, is, as was referred to earlier on from the first question, getting rid of this mix and match between licensing conditions, where you've got one council that wants a 2-year-old vehicle and one that wants a 20-year-old vehicle, one that allows tinted windows and their neighbour that doesn't, one that wants a vehicle with square wheels and one that wants them with triangle wheels. Some of the policies that are out there are absolutely ludicrous, and that is the overarching idea from what we can see of devolution. Bring more sense into the industry, make it logical, make it work. Right, final question, Sham, because we are very, very out of time now.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. Gentlemen mentioned about the Wales that you have big events. In Manchester, sir, we have very big events too. Park Life, all sold out every year. Greater Manchester, like 10 authorities. Private hire can only pick up booked jobs. I mean, if you mentioned earlier on that we need people to come and work and this. I mean, the private hire has to be booked. This gentleman here, he knows what he's talking about, spot on, yeah, and I agree with him. And so, other than that,
that's high commendation, Jim.
and also in Manchester, I was in the meeting in Manchester. Dave was in the meeting. We was there. I was in the Bury meeting. Greater Manchester. We attend all council meetings all the time. So we have hackney carriage ranks in nearby for people to accommodate them, and same in the north of Manchester, because Heaton Park is the largest in Europe and also is part of Bury as well. Yeah, so we can accommodate people. If anyone else from private hire is going there and picking up, which is called PU, and they're ripping people off from Heaton Park, well, it's 2 miles down to Victoria Station, charging £50, £100, that's a rip-off. It's not acceptable. That's every firm, whether it's, I'm sorry, Matthew, whether it's Uber or any streetcars or any company, they do that all the time, my friend. I'm an operator myself, even my own drivers, but, I send them home. But the gentleman mentioned earlier on, sir, regarding, yes, sorry, Dave. The gentleman mentioned earlier on regarding your drivers ranking up on private hire. No private hire driver can rank up on any private road more than 3 cars. And Uber drivers, they're ranking up outside on the ranks in Manchester, in Piccadilly Station. I have seen it with my own eyes. They're not allowed. How can they do that, sir? I mean, you have a main office in Manchester. I mean, you should send a message to drivers, please do not rank up on taxi ranks or anywhere in the city centre. Well, you know, it's because they're taking work, the PU in. It's not acceptable, sir.
Was there an actual question there?
The actual question is to Matthew, because their drivers are acting up, not the gentleman mentioned earlier on.
Okay, so the question was to Mark, can you send a bulletin out and keep an eye on your drivers to prevent them from ranking up an unlawful apply for hire?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for your questions. That's gone really, really well and been thoroughly enjoyable. I'm sure everybody on the panel will agree as well. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody from the panel, our experts, Jim Button, Matthew Freckleton, Mike Smith, Lee Beach, and Paul Elliott from the Department for Transport. Thank you very much, one and all.